Everyone, this is Gene Geog History, and today I'm going to conclude the series that I've been doing on mixed race groups, where I initially covered the mulatto groups, which is Sub-Saharan African plus West Eurasian, and I also covered the Blasian groups, which is West Eurasian plus East Eurasian, and now I'm going to do the Blasian groups, which is East Eurasian plus Sub-Saharan African. And just from the start, I don't know if there's going to be a whole lot of people in this group, especially when it comes to the recent and ancient groups. So I don't think this will be as long as the other two videos, but I might be surprised as I work through this video. Okay, so we're going to focus on the recently admixed groups, and these are groups that were admixed post 1500, so within the last 500 years, essentially. And the admixture is historically documented and often ongoing, and it's very recent when it comes to the timeline of humanity. So that's the basis for the recently admixed Blasian groups. Okay, so when it comes to the Blasian groups that are of East Asian descent, I'm kind of just going to go through them relatively quickly, and there's not a whole lot to say just in general, because this admixture mainly comes from Black people either moving to these East Asian countries, East Asian people moving to these predominantly Black countries, or from them living in places like the United Kingdom, the United States, and Canada, and then them breeding and mixing there. So this is the case with Afro-Japanese people, which are modern African slash Afro-diasporic and Japanese people, Afro-Korean people, same thing with them being African or Afro-diasporic and Korean, and Afro-Chinese, which is African, often West or slash Central African or Afro-Caribbean people, plus Han or Southern Chinese people. This mix is more popular in the Caribbean and in the Americas in general, specifically in the Caribbean and even in Latin America, because there's more migration of Chinese people in these areas compared to the others. I think maybe Brazil has more Afro-Japanese people, but that's just kind of what it is when it comes to the East Asian groups. Alrighty, so now I'm going to move on to the Blasian Southeast Asian. So these are countries like Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, the Philippines, and that area. And pretty much the Blasian admixture with these groups is the same way that they were done for the Blasian East Asians, with either Black people moving to the Southeast Asian countries and procreating with the native inhabitants there, or the Southeast Asian people moving to a predominantly Black country and then procreating with the Black people there. Or the most likely case is that people from both groups are in the Americas, the United Kingdom, Australia, or an anglicized country or like Canada, and then they procreate to have their Blasian offspring there. So that's the most likely case there. They're generally 50-50, and it's the same process. There's not a whole lot to explain or delve into with this. Now we are going to move on to the anciently admixed groups. So these are the Blasian admixtures that were done before 500 years ago. So 501 years ago and way beforehand. The thing about this is that this admixture really wasn't that common or wasn't common at all when it comes to the ancient times. And yes, there were people who left Africa to migrate into what would eventually become Asia. The people who were a part of the out of Africa migration, they weren't the sub-Saharan African people known today, since that group evolved way after the out of African movement took place. So it's not the same people and it's not the same admixture. Groups that would fit under this that I'm not really considering are the cities, the Andamanese people, and the Vedas, which are in South Asia, but even still, I don't really consider South Asians to be um, East Eurasian outside of the Northeast Indians. And it's pretty much the same with the Negrito groups in Southeast Asia, where they have very ancient populations with partial African related ancestry, but it's not the same. They're not recent African migrants, and they descend from the early African populations that I mentioned, but they are mixed with the East Eurasian. And it's pretty much the same thing with the Oceanians in the Papuan people, the Melanesians, and the Aboriginal Australians, as all these people are literally the oldest continuous populations outside of Africa and were very, 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 very early out of Africa migrants. With all of that being said, the only anciently admixed group that fits the Blasian category are the Malagasys, which are the people from Madagascar, as they are generally half East African and that generally being from the Bantu people, and the other half being Southeast Asian, i.e. Austronesian, where Austronesians originated in Taiwan, and then the strand that would caused the migration to Malagasy would travel throughout southeastern Asia and then they made their way to Madagascar, hence them mixing with the East African Bantu people and then creating their own Malagasy people. It's one of, if not the clearest ancient Afro-Asian Grecian populations, and this has been happening for centuries, which has just remained with them consistently mixing with one another for multiple generations, hence them being the main slash only anciently admixed Blasian group. And it's not from one black person or one Asian person getting together, but it's uninterrupted multi generational mixing. So that is them. So, in the past two videos, I did something where I looked at the recent admixed groups and the ancient admixed groups to see which ones are closest to 50-50% split between the mixes. And honestly, I don't really feel like I need to do that. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the recently admixed groups first. Generally, all of them are roughly a 50-50 split, and that's because it's usually, or the recently admixed Blasian groups are a result of one black parent and one Asian parent. So the split is either 50-50%. When it comes to like Blasians who have um either Black Caribbean or Black American descent, they generally do have a tiny bit of European because there's a tiny bit of European in African Americans and Black Caribbean people. So their results would look like 50% Asian, East Asian or East Eurasian, 40-ish% Sub-Saharan African, and 10% European or West Eurasian. That's what the result will be. But if it's the admixture from a straight African person and a straight Asian person, then the result would be 50-50 right down in the middle. So, like I mentioned, the only anciently admixed Blasian group are the Malagasy people, and with them, their average admixture for lies. There are a decent amounts that are roughly 50-50 split between East Eurasian and Sub-Saharan African. There's some that are slightly more Sub-Saharan African leaning, so it'll be like 60% Sub-Saharan African and 40% East Eurasian, while others are roughly around 60% East Eurasian and 40% Sub-Saharan African, and some are even more imbalanced like that. So the range between them is a lot wider compared to the average recently admixed Blasian, and I hope I make sense with all this that I'm explaining now. Alrighty, in conclusion, that's all that I have for the Blasian video when it comes to the recent and ancient admixture. I knew right from the jump that this wasn't going to be as long as the other two, and I don't know if it's because it really has nothing to do with Eurocentrism or whiteness. So there isn't that much information out there, or the colonization wasn't that deep, or at least when it comes to the ancient and mixed groups, which is why there really isn't much of them. But yeah, it's unfortunate that I couldn't state more about them, but there just simply isn't that many groups that have the mixture of sub-Saharan African and East Eurasian. And obviously the more modern ones are just general Blasian groups with one black parent and one Asian parent. But yeah. Anyways, thank you for watching this video and the other two videos, and I'll be back with something else soon. Take care.